Hello there, everyone. We hope you're doing well today. Welcome to the Popcorn Podcast. We are Family Films Productions, entertaining you and your family. Wherever you may be with interviews, stories, and lots more. Listen to Popcorn on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Today's interview is with actor and producer Dean Bulter. Dean has been most well known as his role on Little House on the Prairie, playing Almanzo Wilder. This interview was conducted back in 2009 by Aaron Passantine. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, this is Aaron Passantine with the videosforfamily.com website, and I'm very pleased and honored to have with us today Dean Bulter, who played Almanzo Wilder on Little House on the Prairie. How are you, Dean?
Very good, Aaron. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Well, for my first question, how did you get interested in acting, and how did that lead up to you to get into the role of Almanzo Wilder on Little House on the Prairie?
Well, how did I get interested in acting? I think that probably started when I was a child. Had an interest in watching people perform, and
right.
Always, not always, but there came a point, I think, when during early years in high school where, like most young people, I think most young people want to identify something that they're good at.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important for people to feel like there is something that they excel at, that they are recognized for by their peers, that differentiates them from other people. And I think that's really important, whether it be athletics or scholastic work or artistic music, that sort of thing. So I discovered, I certainly was a process of elimination. I realized that I was never going to be, the star athlete on any team. And I was participating, but I knew that I was never going to be the top guy on any team. And I was drawn into theater by, the way most guys get drawn into theaters, by a girl that they like. And so I was sort of drawn in there and sort of discovered that I liked it, and discovered that that people enjoyed me doing it, and I was able to communicate something to people. So that was really the beginning of it. Then I went off to college and started doing commercials in San Francisco. I was raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. I went off to college at the University of the Pacific, and the University of the Pacific is up in Stockton, California. It's in California's Central Valley. They have a very good drama program there. I started doing plays up there, and then started doing commercials in San Francisco after my freshman year. And then after my junior year in college, I had the opportunity to audition for a really wonderful part in a movie the week for CBS called Forever. It was based on a Judy Blume novel entitled Forever, a very popular book of its time. I was cast in that to play the male lead in that. It was just a terrific opportunity to work with a wonderful actress named Stephanie Zimbalist and a great director named John Cordy up in San Francisco, who had done things like Farewell to Manzanar, which won Emmys, and the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, which won Emmys. He was really a great director, and he's not known to today's audience, but people who of a certain age would remember those movies and realize what a skilled, terrific guy he was. And then that led ultimately to coming to Los Angeles, getting an agent, and then in the spring of 1979, I had the opportunity to audition for Little House, and that worked out. And Aaron, it was just one of many, many, many auditions that you go on, and it just happened to be the one that worked. And I really believe these things work for a reason.
That's right.
And I'm not speaking in terms of spirituality on that. I just think that there are projects that people are right for, where it's obvious that you're right for it. It's clear the second you walk in the door that you're the right person, or you could be one of the right people to do a particular job. And Little House was that for me, and I've never looked back after, and it's been now coming up on 30 years since I first got involved in it, and I have never regretted a day, ever regretted a day having been involved with Little House. It's a fantastic property to have been involved in for so many reasons. So That's my short answer to
Yeah.
how to get involved in Little House.
Well, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, preparation for the episodes on the show, did you spend time, I guess, even in your spare time, reading the Little House books at all?
I went out and bought all the Little House books, and I did not, I'll be honest, I did not read them from cover to cover at all. What I did was I skimmed them quickly to get a sense of the feeling of the books.
Right.
I wanted to get a sense of the tone of how they were written. What was the voice of the books? What was the sort of the overall tone and timbre of what Nicholas Wilder was writing? That's really clear. I mean, you get that right away. You get the sense that this is written in a very sweet way. It's an innocent way. It's a story of a little girl, or in the beginning, a story of a young girl in her voice describing what her life was like on the prairie with her family. And, you know, what could be more endearing than that? Obviously, as Laura gets older, the voice gets a little older, but it maintains this innocent purity to it, which is, you know, full of optimism and hope, and things are very clean and simple in these stories. And I think that that's what came across to me as I read them. And then reading scripts for Little House, I realized, okay, we are in exactly the same vein here. Everything is in sync with the way the books are written and the way the scripts are written, the way the stories are told. They were very much in sync in their overall quality. I was not necessarily encouraged to read the books by anyone involved in the show, because the show was, other than the very, very important story points, which all Little House readers know about, we were not doing the books in a sequential way at all.
That's right.
And so there was no real reward for that. I think getting the tone of the books was much more important at that time. I did read other books that were about homesteading on the American frontier and so on, and they painted a much bleaker, darker picture of what homesteading was like. And I read those books, several of those books, and then I looked at what we were doing, and I realized we are not doing that. We are not telling the bleak, dark. There were episodes where things got a little rough for people, no question about that.
Right.
But the overall tone was a very sunny, positive, green grass and wildflowers blooming on the prairie kind of look at life in that time. It was an idyllic, beautiful presentation that we were making, and the audience loved it for that reason. And so I realized that, okay, there's maybe some place for this information about the gritty life that people lived in this time, and it was a gritty, brutal, difficult life that people lived out there trying to survive and get these claims settled and so on.
Right.
But that's not the show we were making. That was somebody else's show, and it wasn't. And I think certainly have been shows that have tried to do that, and they've never been terribly successful.
Right.
Because people don't want to tune in and watch people suffering.
That's right.
And that was Michael's position, is that people don't want to watch this. They don't want to watch the struggle. They want to see people in clean clothes, with clean faces, clean hands, sitting down to a meal at the table where there's food on the table, where people are happy and positive. And it just absolutely worked as a storybook telling or a story representation of these books. Because that's what the books felt like, as much as it really wasn't like that. You know, Laura's life wasn't sunny and easy.
Right.
As she wrote it.
Difficult.
It just wasn't.
Right.
But she was writing it for children. She wanted children to have a good experience as they read her books. And I think this was a critically tactical decision on her part, because she could have gone an entirely different way with the way she wrote these books. This was really a tough time. So anyway, I think that so books. I read the books for the tone, not for the facts. Obviously, there were things. I am much more familiar with the books today than I was when I was doing the show.
Right.
I've become much more interested in that because my involvement with the Little House community has broadened over the years, and so I feel, I became more interested in knowing more about the books. But for my time on the show, my commitment and my emphasis or my energy was focused on doing what was called for on the show. So that was the goal, and my job was to follow Michael Landon's direction and go where he wanted to go, and I just didn't question that stuff. That's where we went, and everyone followed Michael's direction, and it worked out really well for everyone. So that's my short answer to that question.
Thank you. Well, I do appreciate the detailed responses. So, thank you.
Sure.
Now, can you recall any challenges that you guys faced on the set while filming, I guess, more in particularly the episodes that you were in?
Yeah, my recollection about challenges on the set, the challenges came about really more from me personally, just being concerned about holding up my end of the scene, being able to work with the dialogue and make it work, and not trip on the furniture. And I came into the situation in the 6th year. The show was a finely tuned watch. It worked, it just worked wonderfully well. People had, the show had a rhythm, not only in the way it was written, but in the way that it was produced. And, as a newcomer, you don't want to come in and upset that rhythm in any way. And that became, that was my challenge, was to come in and just fit into it and not upset the furniture in any way. That's what I saw. Now other people might have had a different sense of what their challenges were, but that's the challenge that I took on. My job was to fit in, and I think sometimes I fit in really well, and other times I didn't fit in so really well. But I always tried my best to fit in well, and I recognized very quickly that the show was very unique and distinct on television. There was nothing else like it on the air. There has rarely been anything like it in the years since. So it's a special piece of television, and so I'm always grateful to have been a part of it.
Right, and I'm very glad you were able to be a part of it. Now, I know there were at times, especially during the episode Days of Sunshine, Days of Shadow, and there was obviously your character had a stroke, and I was just wondering if you could explain about that and how you had to get into character for that.
I went when we were getting ready to do Days of Sunshine, Days of Shadow, which was the end of the 8th season. Our producer Kent McCrae came to me and said, "You have a lot to do in this particular episode. I think that you should go see a doctor, and there are doctors in town that work with the industry to help actors deal with the challenges of playing medical issues." And I'm sorry I cannot remember the doctor's name now, but what was interesting about it was that there are things that are playable and there are things that are not playable. In the case of a stroke, the thing that was playable was a speech impediment. You can play that your speech is impaired. You can play paralysis. You can play depression. In the case of diphtheria, I think we played. Because that's how it all began. I think what we played was a breathing problem. You're not able to draw breath, so there was a wheezing that came with that. So it really came down to a question of what was playable, and picking a couple of symptoms, because you can't play everything. You just have to pick a couple of things that allow you to that you can use sort of layered on top of the performance, so you know you have some restrictions of things that you can't do, and that's or things that you can do to represent what the condition is. So that's what we did, and I'm grateful for that, because I think that we were able to, at moments in those two shows, capture, a sense of what he was going through, and I know that Almanzo in his life went through these things, and unlike what we did, where at the end of 90 minutes, or at the end of the hour, 2.5 hour show, Almanzo was essentially back to normal. I mean, there was a little limp at the end, but the next week all was well.
Right.
And that's sort of the nature of episodic television, and at least it was at that time. Today, I think that if someone had a situation like that happen, you'd see that condition played out. I mean, for example, we watch on Fox, there's House, and you see this doctor, and he has this limp, and he has this cane, and that's a part of who that man is. If we had been going down that road, we would have, I would have had a cane or something with me for the rest of the time on the show, because Almanzo in his life struggled with whether he used a cane, or I don't think he used a crutch, but there would have been times when he needed that.
Right.
But we didn't go there, and I think there was a good reason in the logic of the way television gets aired. Once the initial run of the show is over, it goes into syndication, and stations start running the show. Now cable networks are running the show. There's no guarantee that they're going to run the show in order.
Right. Yeah.
And so you could be in a situation where one day there's a cane, and the next day there's not, and then there's a cane the following day. Like, what's going on here?
Right.
And so it requires the audience to have a prior knowledge of what went on. And I think what the idea with anthology television, which is what Little House was these self-contained stories. There were obviously broad plot points that carried forward, people getting married, characters dying, that sort of thing. That carried from episode to episode in the biggest sense. But most of the time, you want an audience to be in this vein of episodic television. You want an audience to be able to step in and watch a show that started at 8 o'clock and ended at 9 o'clock. And it would be nice if they had some prior knowledge, but they didn't need to have a lot of prior knowledge to understand what was going on. And that was a big important goal. The show had to be accessible to someone who just tuned into it. And of course in syndication, because you don't know how the order that people are going to air episodes, it's very important that the shows air that the shows are self-contained.
Right.
And so you don't want to be loading too many conditions into the episode, so that people have to have a lot of prior understanding.
What are some of your memories of working with Michael Landon? Some of the things that
Well, Michael Landon was a phenom in the world of episodic television. This was a guy who was, had matinee idol good looks. He could write, he could direct, he was a producer. Michael wore all the major hats that a person could wear, or that need to be worn in a major production, and he wore them all with skill and ease and certainty. And the reason that the show worked so well consistently year after year after year is because Michael Landon was in this position. And not to say that other people couldn't have been in that position, but he was in that position. It's rare that you can find somebody who can wear all those hats. It's one thing to be a writer, a director, a producer. That's one thing, but you add star to that, and that adds a level of cachet and power to the position that most writer producers never have. And Michael was a phenomenon in in network television, and he was for over 25 years. Look at what he did with Bonanza and what he did with Full House, what he did with Highway, and he was getting ready to do it again. And this guy was a staple of network television, and he understood his audience and understood what he was trying to do extremely well. I never saw a look of doubt on his face. There was, apparently, on the surface at least, absolute certainty about what he was trying to accomplish. And so he really made it possible for the show to do what it did. And he understood what his audience wanted from him, and he gave it to them. And he wasn't concerned that a great many people would have no interest. Mm-hmm. He knew that he could never be all things to all people. He knew he was never going to be able to appeal to everybody, so he chose to appeal to a very romantic, emotional, family-oriented segment of the audience, which is, as it turns out, a huge television audience. And he went right at them in a way that absolutely touched them week after week after week after week. And it was a marvel to watch Michael work. I will forever be grateful that I was given the opportunity to participate in the show and be a part of it and watch him work and so on. He was a very special guy, and there's nobody that worked with Michael that would not, you would never forget working with Michael Landon. He just would have that kind of magnetic quality about him. Very special guy.
Honestly, of all the producers and the people that I know about now, I mean, I'm 26 years old, and I still think that Michael Landon was the best one. So,
well, there are a lot of good producers out there. There are a lot of really talented people. There's no question about it.
Right.
Michael was a man of his time. Mm-hmm. Would Michael be producing television the way he produced television today? Would the market support it today? I don't know. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But I know that television, what I can look at and say is television is a vastly different landscape than it was when he was making television. It's a very different animal now from a perspective of, not only in terms of what's on television, but how it's made. It's a very different animal. So, but I think that Michael would have always been appreciated by a segment of the audience. I don't think that appreciation would ever have gone away.
Right.
But he was definitely a man of his time. He delivered in a very particular way, and it was great.
Well, how long? How well did you get along with Melissa Gilbert?
Well, where Melissa Gilbert's concerned, I came into the show. I'm 8 years older than Melissa, so we came in at 23. She was 15 when we started. Melissa was a seasoned pro when and really in every sense of the word, a seasoned professional when I came into the show. So, it was really I was the guy 8 years older, but I was really the kid in terms of my skills, my experience. I had virtually really just minimal experience coming into this. And I'd done a movie, and I'd done one small movie and commercials and so on, but I had never worked under the kind of 8-show, one of the series television grind of 22, 23 episodes a year after year after year. Melissa carrying episode after episode after episode because her character was so important. It was really she and Michael that were the cores of the protagonist side of the show. And you had Catherine McGregor, you had Allison Arngren as Ellie Olsen, who were holding down most of the antagonist side of the show. Mm-hmm. So, but I think Melissa and I think are, which I'm really grateful for, are much closer today than we ever were when we worked together, because we just had at that stage, an 8-year difference in age is a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
We really just, there was not a lot to say to each other.
Right.
We had to work together, and I think, given all the things that had to be done, Melissa had never been in a relationship before. I think I was probably among Melissa's first kisses in her life. She was being asked to do things and play things that she had absolutely no experience with. And I didn't have a lot of experience in those areas either, but she had even less. What she did have was her just uncanny, unrelenting kind of moxie that she was just willing to do anything. And she was fearless.
Right.
Melissa is a fearless person. She was fearless then, she's fearless today. And she has unwavering confidence in herself that she's going to be able to do what's asked of her. And she did it then. She did it huge. It's just amazing, really, when you look at what she was asked to do in some of those episodes, to go from being a little girl with pigtails to being the young romantic ingenue. Virtually overnight when it happened, and she just did do it, and she did a great job. And Melissa's portrayal of Laura Ingalls, Laura Ingalls Wilder, is the enduring portrayal of her career. I can't imagine that she will. It would be miraculous if she got the opportunity to play such an iconic character again and not be able to put such a stamp on it. But Melissa Gilbert is Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Yeah.
In the minds of millions and millions of people, she's the face that you think of. You think of Laura Ingalls Wilder, you think of television, you think of Melissa Gilbert. There really isn't anyone else, as much as a handful of other people, three or four other people who played Laura Ingalls and Laura Ingalls Wilder in the years since her show.
Right.
But no one has replaced Melissa Gilbert as the leading perception of who that character is. No one has replaced Michael Landon in the leading perception of who Charles Ingalls was. And frankly, nobody who's played these characters since they were portrayed on the original series has replaced the image of who these characters are. And I think that's one. I think it's mainly because we were the first ones to the party. When you're the first, when you're the original, you become the standard.
Right.
And I think that's true. That's true with products. It's true with movies. It's very hard to replace things. Now, I think if Little House got done again in the next, in the years ahead, if the deal were put together to bring Little House back to television, and they really did a great job of casting it, writing it, for a whole new generation of people, whatever this new show would become the standard.
Right.
Because it's what they would have seen for the most part. Although, interestingly enough, I know I'm jumping all over the place here, more people are seeing our version of Little House today because of DVD and cable and global distribution that saw it when it was new. So, if our show it's going to be hard to replace the original because it's still present. It's still so present in people's minds and so available to people. If it completely had disappeared, it would be easier to replace. But it has not disappeared at all. It's as for those who love it, it is as real in people's minds today as it was then, and it's moving on to the next generations of people. There's an entirely new generation of Little House watchers now because of DVD and cable television. So it's pretty great. I'll circle back to finish with Melissa. Melissa will always be Laura, and I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to share that experience with her. I feel very lucky to have that chance.
Great. Well, obviously, most people that watch Little House on the Prairie know that later on the show changed from Little House on the Prairie to Little House in the Beginning. I was wondering if you could kind of explain why there was a name change.
Well, when the show went from being Little House on the Prairie to Little House: A New Beginning, because Michael and Karen and the sort of the rest of the Ingalls family, Carrie and Mary and Adam, and they largely stepped away from the show, and the show became about Laura and Almanzo and Mr. Edwards and the Olsons and so on. And I think that, whether it needed to have a name change or not, that I guess that's debatable. One could say it did or didn't. And I don't know quite. I can't tell you why it happened, but or why the name changed. But I know that Michael reached a point where he felt like he could no longer have the kind of dynamic with Laura that had made the show so successful. Laura was, he'd grown Laura up. Laura was married. Laura was getting ready to have children of her own. She couldn't sit on Pa's knee and have those kinds of heartfelt conversations that made the show such a jewel in people's minds for so many years. And something had to change. And he tried to do it by reintroducing small children into the house, and he brought in Jason Bateman, and the actress named Missy Francis. And obviously he had Matt Laberto to play the Albert character, the invented character, so that he could have a son in the family, so that those kinds of stories could get told. But I think he felt like he had told all those stories that he could tell, and that there had to be a shift into the next generation. And Days of Sunshine, Days of Shadow was his way of testing to find out if Melissa and I could do the show, if we could be the leads in the show, and we could move forward with it. I think that was really, at least that's the way the story went down. Yes. Days of Sunshine, Days of Shadow was sort of the test for us, and we apparently did fine with that test, and so they went ahead with this revised version of the show. And then of course they had to put the Carter family in the Little House, and brought in that new family so that there would be that dynamic. And I think they did a great job with Stan Ivar and Pam Roy Lance and the two boys, creating a kind of a very loving, warm dynamic between two people, so that the Little House would have, they put a similar energy in the Little House what Michael and Karen brought to it. Pam Roy Lance was a lovely presence, but could be the Ma kind of, the Caroline kind of presence. Stan had Stan Ivar as John Carter, had a quality about him that you could say, yeah, there's a similar feeling to, when he wasn't Michael, he wasn't supposed to be Michael, but, they brought a nice presence to it. And then, of course, you had Catherine McGregor and Richard Bull, and finally got, starring Billy, and, they were just incredible, always, all the years, made such a difference in the show. And, then, of course, you had Victor French, who had been a staple on the show from the very beginning and went away for a while, but came back as Mr. Edwards. And, Victor was terrific because he was a wonderful actor. He was a terrific director. He became the sort of the leading presence on, he became the leading figure on the show, not necessarily in terms of the billing, but in terms of who was Victor, because of his experience and so on, and his skill. He had that position with all of us. We were all prepared to follow Victor. We certainly saw Michael. He was around. He was doing Father Murphy with Merlin Olsen and my now wife, Catherine Cannon. So they were busy. They were busy doing that, and we didn't see him as much, but he certainly was around. But I think it was just to give it, a little boost. I don't know, I don't know if it needed a name change, frankly, but okay, that's what happened. And, and I think that, terms of it being canceled after the 9th year, I think that it's possible that it could have gone on another year, but I think Michael was really done. I just think he felt like, 9 years with this huge cast, all the contracts, having to take care of these different characters, give them all things to do, and it really was a lot to deal with. And so I think it just became time. I don't think he even thought it was going to end after that 9th year at that time, but when it did, it was sort of a shock, but it wasn't a total shock.
Right. Thank you. That's very, very interesting. What are your thoughts on Little House Last Farewell? I know that was the final episode of Little House, and I know that was very, very difficult for you guys to film, and also obviously to be in. If you can explain your thoughts on that.
The Last Farewell was the third of the movies of the week that we, after the show was canceled after the 9th season, we all thought it was over, and about a month later, we all got a call from Michael saying that NBC had asked him to do 3 movies in a week that would allow the show to be sort of blocked, but to put an end on it, so that it didn't just sort of stop, but that they felt that it had been on the air for such a long time, it deserved an ending.
Right.
And I think Michael really wanted it to be an ending, and he did not want to have to come back to it. So that's the feeling that we all got. He just, once he was done with it, he did not want to have to revisit it. And The Last Farewell came out of a number of things. One, he needed a closing story, and secondly, he knew that at the conclusion of the series, there was a lease on the land at Getting Oil Ranch that required that the land be returned to its original condition. All the buildings would have to be removed. It was cattle grazing country. It had to be put back in that condition. So Michael, being the always inventive executive producer he was, looked for a way to get some production value out of the fact that these buildings were going to have to be removed. And why not get a big bang for the buck instead of just having to do a story and then tear the thing down?
Right.
So I think it was really sort of brilliant what he came up with, and fashioned a story that the Hero Township or Walnut Grove was acquired by this man Lassiter.
Yeah. I think it was John Lassiter. I thought, if I can remember correctly. Yes.
So and suddenly we're going to be working for him and so on. Well, I mean, it was a little bit of a stretch, but okay, you can wrap your head around this thing, and so we made the decision. He had the characters make the decision. You may own the land, but you don't own the buildings. The buildings are ours, and if we can't work on our land, then we're going to leave. And we're going to take the buildings with us, or we're going to leave. We're going to destroy the buildings and leave.
Right.
And an interesting message, but I think it gave him the ability to create closure, and it was very powerful for everybody because we all knew it was going to be over, and this way he really made it over. There was no chance we were going to go back to this thing, because once you destroy the town, what are you going to do? How would you ever come back to it? So there was this great sense of finality about it that we really all grasped, and it really was truly over. And I think it made it very emotional for everybody. Now, whether that, and I think in some cases it translated well for the audience, but it certainly translated for all of us. We certainly got the fact that for those people who have been involved in the show from the very beginning, like Melissa Gilbert, Catherine McGregor, Richard Poole, all the crew that have been part of it from the very beginning, which is a very tight group of people who have been doing this thing together for 10 years. Michael, for Kim McRae, for our producer Kim McRae. I mean, it was really closure, and so it became very emotional, and it was very powerful, and there was this great bonding that came result of having it end this way. And so it was, you know, it was pretty strong. And the day, you know, when we were not allowed to be there when the town was actually, when any of the buildings were blown up. They had minimum crew there. You know, the insurance risks of having cast on around were just too great. So, you know, we shot all the coverage of us pushing plungers down was done separately. You know, shooting reverse angles away from places that were being blown up. So when we blew them up, they were still there. You know, in terms of what we physically in reality saw. When we pushed the plungers, nothing changed.
Wow.
But so we're, you know, playing what may have been. Now, when we finally went back and did that end sequence where we're all standing there looking at the rubble of the town exploded, I mean, obviously that was all real, and that's the first time any of us saw it, all blown up.
Right.
And, you know, and the smoke was still rising from the explosions. I mean, you know, there was still, you could still smell fire, you could still smell plastic powder, you could, you know, all of that was still in the air when we went out there that day. And that was pretty strong stuff to walk through that town and just see it in rubble everywhere all around you. And then to see it all, you know, when you saw it all come together, obviously, that was really sort of stunning to see how it all really came together. But just as a group of people walking through that space that for many people, where they'd spent 10 years of their life working in this area, making the show, loving the show, nurturing the show, you know, that was powerful stuff for those people to see that part of their life literally come to an end right in front of them. So it was really, really strong. I mean, you know, the art met reality in that situation, and I think that, you know, you saw it in people's eyes on the screen when, you know, when you cut to people and you look at the smoke rising off the shattered buildings, the exploded buildings. I mean, that's real.
Right.
You know, we weren't there when they exploded, but we may as well have been. It was real.
Right.
So, you know, pretty great. It was. It made for a very strong, cathartic kind of an ending for people.
Hopefully, you felt after that. I mean, hopefully you felt there was closure, you know, for you personally. Hopefully, so. I mean.
Well, I don't think, you know, the nice thing, Aaron, is that it's never ended for me. You know, I mean, and I don't think it's really ever ended for any of them.
Right, of course not. I mean, you know what I'm saying. As far as the shows go, I'm sure many of you guys would have appreciated it if it kept going on even more.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no question. I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't.
Right.
You know, if the opportunity had been there to get on, we absolutely would have.
Sure, that's what I mean.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
There's no doubt we would have. All of us would have. And I think it's safe to say most people in a situation similar to ours would continue on. Because it's always easier to deal with, you know, with the challenges, the struggles, sometimes the frustrations, you know, all the things that go with doing anything that's creative and artistic. Any job has its challenges. It wasn't the perfect situation all the time for everybody, but it was the thing that you knew. There was a comfort zone in it that we all understood. In many ways, maybe, you know, the comfort zone is not a thing for creative people. So in some ways, it was time for it to end. But we certainly would have gone on if the opportunity had presented itself, and, you know, we would have done some nice shows. But, you know, things work out the way they're supposed to work out, and it ended when it was supposed to end. It ended when it did. You know, and everyone just moved on, and, you know, there are those of us who have stayed closer to the property than others in the years since, and, you know, from my perspective, I'm just very grateful that I have been able to stay close to it and found ways to stay close to it, because it's always been meaningful to me.
That's great. Well, I have just the last final question, so there won't be too many more for you to answer. All right. When you look back at the popularity of Little House on the Prairie, and how do you think that has changed now compared to?
Well, I think, you know, I think it's we're at a different age. I mean, we are, popularity of a set of books. These books were first published in the 1930s. Based on stories that are based on lives that occurred, 150 years before that, 100 years, 120, 130 years, 130 years ago from today, 150 years ago from today. Our world changes, our perspective changes. We are a very different country than we were when the books were first published in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Our lives are different. Our expectations and things our contact with this material culturally is diminished. We do not come from an agrarian. We are not an agrarian culture anymore. We're an industrial service culture now. So, there are fewer people that have an understanding and a contact with the agricultural life that their stories were based around. So I think that from a context of just understanding and having an intuitive understanding of what these characters went through, I think that may be somewhat diminished.
Mm-hmm.
But what hasn't been diminished, and I don't think what will never be diminished, is the basic authentic truth of what's in these books about the human condition, about optimism, about the love of family, about struggle through hard times, the importance of education, the value of commitment and sticking with it, having a stick-to-it attitude about things, the need to survive. Those things have not changed. Those things will never change. Those are universal themes that will transcend everything. And I think that the people who continue to embrace the books and embrace the television series embrace it for that reason, because there is something universal and unwaveringly truthful about what was done there. It may have been done in a way that was in some ways a fantasy, or certainly had a feel of fiction, but there were underlying truths in the fiction that resonate with people. I mean, that's why when they watch the show, that's why people cry.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they laugh.
Right.
Because it resonates with something that's so authentic and honest and pure,
Mm-hmm.
and just what is in the guts of us as human beings. And it's unmistakable. You can't miss it. It sneaks up on you. You may not be expecting it to happen, but if you watch it, it will get you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read the books, they will get you.
That's
if you
right.
have any openness to that, because any openness to those kinds of emotions in your life, because they just speak the truth.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something lovely and pure about them. And
Right.
I don't think that will ever go away.
No, I'm sure it won't. Now, I know for some time you have been working now with the Melissa Wilder Homestead in New York, and you've even produced a brand new documentary. I know you're very excited about that with your company putting that together.
Well, Aaron, our show is called Melissa Wilder Life Before War. And, for a number of years, I've been producing all the bonus content for the DVDs as well, for all the Little House DVDs. So when people go to the store and they buy season, I think we did season 8, 9, and 10. And the bonus content of this mega pack that's coming out on November 4th nationally for the holidays. We have 3 hours of brand new bonus content in that collection of DVDs. As a producer, I've been able to been able to stay in contact with the show through the creation of content that supports the legacy of the show. When I was invited in September of 2006 to come to Malone, New York to help celebrate Melissa Wilder's 150th birthday the following September, we talked about what would I do when I was there, and what what they like me to do, because I've certainly done, as all of us have, lots of appearances at Little House historic sites. I haven't been to all of them, but I certainly intend to get to all of them before I'm through. And we talked about things that maybe could be done on their site. And given that I was right in the middle of creating all this bonus content, I just said to them, well, why aren't we doing a documentary about Almanzo based around your site? Because it's, you know, it's a unique thing. And they really, they got very excited about that idea, and I got excited about that idea, and so we worked on it, you know, we worked on the plan for months. September of 2007, you know, I took my favorite shooter, and we flew to New York, did the appearance, and my wife Catherine was there too, and we, you know, we shot for 3 days in and around the homestead in the land, you know, in northern New York, which is an absolutely gorgeous country. And so we shot there, and we came back, and we put a trailer together and put it up on YouTube and announced that we were going to have a show in March of 2008. And then as we were in that process of looking at, you know, what we were going to make with all this, it became apparent that we had really, and we knew it when we were there shooting, but we really couldn't do anything about it. We said, you know, what we don't have, we don't have any animals in the show. There, you know, there are no horses, there are no oxen, there's none of the boy stuff. Now, when we were there, we saw lots of knitting, and we saw cooking, and we saw crafts, and we saw all those kinds of things, but we didn't see any of Almanzo's life, or things that could be connected to Almanzo's life. This became a great concern to us as we started thinking about, well, what are we going to put together here? It's supposed to be about Almanzo, but what do we have? And then we came to the conclusion that we needed to shoot again. And when the Wilder homestead said to me, well, we're bringing the Morgan horses back in June of 2008, and we're bringing oxen in, you know, as they do once a year. They always do this, so every other year. They said, well, we have to come back and shoot again. You know, we have to shoot more. We have to find a little boy to be Almanzo. We have to, well, we just hit the jackpot with this thing. I think it was just, you know, some things are just meant to work out well. And the little boy, Jared Ball, not little boy, he's probably 10, 11. Jared Ball was our primary Almanzo because he was selected because of his comfort around large animals. He did a spectacular job for us, and they've done Sayward. Sayward is S-A-Y-W-A-R-D. Jared Ball is J-A-R-O-D, Ball, B-A-L-L. These two people who had never been on camera before, they'd never acted before, they were really selected because of their horsemanship. And they just did a wonderful, wonderful job. And we only had 4 hours to shoot with the horses. We didn't, you know, they were only there for a short period of time. So we really had to get a lot on camera in order to make this work, or get enough talk to make it work. And we really got fortunate. Not only the weather was terrific, which maybe, you know, could have been bad, but it turned out to be a really nice day, and the two people were terrific. The horse handlers from the Minor Institute in Chazy, New York were just great. And, you know, I mean, it all just came together really, really well. And then combine that with the interviews that we were able to at the same weekend with Bill Anderson, who was obviously such an authority on the Wilder heritage. Barbara Walker, who was a great historian and writer of the Little House Cookbook, and she adds a nice flavor to what we've done. And then we had a wonderful interview with a woman named Karen Lassell, who is the equine manager at the Minor Institute, and talked about the Morgan horses, and talked about the breed. By the way, the Lassell is L-A-S-S-E-L-L. so, we put this thing together. We have two packages in the documentary now. There's one, obviously, the primary package is the Almanzo Wilder Life Before Laura documentary, which takes us through Almanzo's time on the family farm. We not only utilize, one of the wonderful things that we're able to do here is not only do recreations where we do things with the book, or rather we shoot on the location where Almanzo grew up, which is wonderful. But we have utilized the illustrations, a great many of the illustrations that Garth Williams did for the Little House books.
Yes.
And we also utilized text from Farmer Boy, read by my lovely wife, Catherine Cannon. Catherine's with a K, K-A-T-H-E-R-I-N-E, Cannon, C-A-N-N-O-N. And so we have all the pieces of the Little House property in play here. We have sort of film and television rights playing, or film and television, or visual presentation of Almanzo's shot at the Wilder homestead. We have the Garth Williams illustrations, which are just indelible in people's minds when they think of the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. You can't think of those books without thinking of the Garth Williams illustration. So we have those illustrations in play, and we've animated those illustrations so that they move now. So that people will have never seen these pictures move before.
And I noticed that on the trailer, which I thought was very impressive that you guys were able to do that.
Yeah, so
yes.
we put some of the pictures in motion. Some are more extreme than others, but it's nice because it just gives the picture a different life, and so it's really fun for that in that sense, and it has a nice impact in the story. And then of course we use actual text from Farmer Boy to illustrate particular, to be able to recreate particular episodes from Almanzo's time on the farm, as Laura wrote about it, back in the 1930s. So I think we've covered the material in a nice way and given it a new spin on the material, or brought it to life in maybe a different way than people have seen it before. And we'll find out if people like it or not. And we certainly hope they do. And one of the things that's so important about this, this was made as a way to help the Wilder homestead to continue its mission of preserving the Almanzo Wilder legacy, and because of that, the Laura Ingalls Wilder legacy. And so they benefit from this, from the sale of these discs. And we obviously want them to be very successful with this, and so they are the exclusive marketers of it. They are the exclusive sellers of it. I think that obviously it will be people can order it online next season when they open up in May. People will be able to buy it on the site when they visit there. I think there will be an online component to it during the holiday season for people who want to buy it for the Christmas holidays as a gift. So we just hope we hope it is very successful, and we obviously, in that light, we hope to do more of these things. We want to do more, and I think if we do another one, the next one will, without question, be about Laura. And I think that will have that would, I think, be very nicely embraced if it's, if we are able to do it well and do a nice job of it. Work with a lot of the same partners we're working with on this one. So it's an exciting opportunity. I mean, I think the great thing is the Little House goes on and on. And we found a way, hopefully, to bring Little House to an audience in a different way and give them a chance to experience it in a slightly different way, but not altering the values, not altering the tone of the Little House books, keeping that all intact, because that, after all, is the goal of it. What Laura wrote all those many years ago is so enduring, and we just are trying to package it and present it in a way that is contextually interesting for audiences of today, but we're not in any way trying to alter the essential, or we're trying to support the essential truths of what Laura wrote about all those years ago.
Thank you so very much. This has been excellent, and that's all the questions I have. But I do appreciate your time and, again, giving really good, detailed responses. It's just excellent.
This has been a presentation by Family Films Productions in our podcast Popcorn. We are Family Films Productions, and we are entertaining you and your family. More fun to come soon.
Listen to Popcorn on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.